Once upon a time, there was a prince in a certain kingdom. The prince was so handsome that his beauty lit up the royal palace. People couldn't stop talking about his virtues. Words couldn't do justice to his qualities. One day, the prince decided that he wanted to go on a journey across the kingdom. The people of the land were heartbroken. The queen stopped eating and sleeping, and only the king said calmly, "All right, let him go." Then the people of the country began preparing in groups to accompany him. The king gave him attendants and soldiers. The queen brought trays filled with precious jewels and ornaments, but the prince took none of these. No people, no jewels, no soldiers. He simply put on new clothes, hung a brand new sword by his side, and set out alone on his journey. He kept walking, crossing many lands, many mountains, many rivers, and many kingdoms. Finally, the prince arrived deep inside a forest. Look, in that forest, there were no chirping birds, no sound of animals, no sign of tigers or bears. The prince continued to walk through the strange, silent forest. As the prince kept walking and walking far into the forest, he suddenly saw a royal palace right in the middle of the woods. The boundary of the palace began there. Never before had the prince seen such a magnificent palace. He stood there stunned, eyes wide in amazement. The top of the palace gate touched the sky. The gate stretched across the entire width of the forest. But no music played from the top of the gate, and there were no guards at the door. The prince slowly entered the palace. Inside, he saw that the entire palace was spotlessly clean, as if it had been washed with milk. It gleamed dazzlingly white. Yet, in this grand palace, there was not a single soul. No sound could be heard. The place was utterly silent, utterly still. Not a single leaf fell, not a twig moved. The prince was astonished. He looked here and there, carefully observing every corner of the palace. Then he suddenly stopped at one spot. He saw a huge courtyard, and all across it, rows and rows of elephants, horses, soldiers, guards, doormen, sentries, warriors, and nobles were standing. The prince shouted out, but no one responded. No one turned toward him. No one spoke a word. Amazed, the prince went closer and saw that all the rows upon rows of soldiers, warriors, elephants, and horses all had turned into stone statues. Not a single eyelid blinked, not a single hair moved on any of them. The prince stood there in stunned silence. Then the prince went deeper into the palace. He entered one chamber and saw thousands upon thousands of shields, swords, arrows, and bows hanging on the walls. The guards standing nearby all turned to stone. The soldiers, too, stone statues. The prince quietly unbuckled his own sword and moved ahead slowly. In another room, he found the royal court. Golden lamps lit with ghee burned brightly. Jewels and precious gems glittered on every side. But on the royal throne, the king sat, turned into stone. On the minister's seat, the minister too was stone. All the nobles, friends, guards, attendants, wherever they were, they had become stone statues at that very spot. No eyes blinked, no mouth spoke a word. The prince noticed the royal umbrella over the king's head was tilted to one side. In a maid's hand, a fly whisk hung mid-swing. But there was no sound, no movement, as if the whole palace was sunk in an eternal, silent sleep. The prince bowed his head and walked away. He entered yet another chamber and saw what looked like hundreds of lamps blazing all at once, illuminating countless treasures, gems, diamonds, rubies, and pearls, so many that the chamber could barely contain them. The prince didn't touch a thing. He simply looked at it all and quietly moved on to the next chamber. As the prince was just about to enter the next chamber, he was overwhelmed by the fragrance of thousands of flowers. Where was this fragrance coming from? The prince entered the chamber and saw. There was no water, no ripple. But in the middle of the room, millions of lotus flowers had bloomed. The sweet scent of the lotus made the whole room feel dreamy and enchanted. The prince slowly walked closer to the flower bed. As he approached, he saw, amidst the lotus blooms, there was a golden bed. The bed had posts made of diamond, and hanging from the diamond posts was a garland made of flowers. Beneath that garland, on the golden petals of the golden lotus, slept a princess, an extraordinarily beautiful princess, deep in sleep. The sleeping princess's hands were not visible, nor were her feet. Only her face, bathed in moonlight, shimmered softly among the golden lotus petals. The prince leaned gently on one of the diamond posts and stood there, staring in wonder. He kept looking and looking and looking and looking. Years went by, but the princess never woke from her sleep. And the prince never blinked again. The princess lay fast asleep in a deep slumber. The prince, lost in awe, kept watching her. Suddenly, one day, the prince noticed, near the head of the sleeping princess, a golden wand. The prince slowly picked up the golden wand. As soon as he took it in hand, he noticed, on the other side, a silver wand. Surprised, the prince picked up the silver wand too. Now, holding both wands, the prince began to examine and fiddle with them. And while he was looking at them, without realizing, the golden wand accidentally touched the head of the sleeping princess. In that very moment, the lotus garden shivered, the golden bed shook, golden petals began to fall off like rain, and the sleeping princess, her hands returned, her feet returned, she stretched her limbs and rubbed her eyelids. With a start, the sleeping princess sat up from her long slumber. And just then, all around the palace, the birds began to chirp again. The guards rushed back to the gates and shouted. In the courtyard, elephants and horses began to neigh and trumpet. The soldiers clanged their swords with a clash, clang, clatter. In the royal court, the king woke up, the minister woke up, the attendants woke up. From 1,000 years of sleep, whoever was wherever, the guards, the soldiers, the troops, and the commanders, all woke up and stood tall, grabbing their bows, arrows, swords, and spears. Everyone was astonished. Who has entered the royal palace? The prince stood in surprise. The princess looked on, amazed. The king, the minister, and all the royal people gathered and saw. The prince and the princess had bowed their heads. Then all around the palace, drums, trumpets, conches, and horns began to roar in celebration. The king said, "O prince, which fortunate king's son are you, who has rescued us from this death-like sleep?" The people around added, "Oh, you must be the divine son of a god king. A demon had touched us with a silver wand and put our golden kingdom into an eternal sleep. You have come and awakened us, saved us." The prince lowered his head and stood silently. The king then said, "What do I even have worthy of offering you? I give you this princess as your bride. I give you this entire kingdom." Then, flowers rained from the skies. Sandalwood scent filled the air. Flowers bloomed, grains of puffed rice scattered around, and the royal drums beat with a thunderous dum-dum as the silver curse finally shattered. Then, hundreds and hundreds of maids ground sandalwood paste. Thousands of attendants and helpers prepared cosmetics and rituals. At every doorway were auspicious pots filled with sacred water, decorated with 5 types of leaves and flowers. The palace was adorned with alpana designs, sacred decorations, women gathered with gifts and laughter. Seats made of sacred grass were set all around, and the sacred conch, shankha, sounded in all directions. What a spectacle that was! The palace courtyard glittered and gleamed. Every alley echoed with the ululation of joy. The royal palace that had slept for centuries now shook with celebration, overflowing with cheer, noise, and emotion. Then, in the soft glow of the moon, before the sacred fire and the holy priest, with betel leaves, gifts, and royal ornaments, the king gave away the princess in marriage, draped in jewelry and emotions. With the 5-jewel crown, he handed over his daughter and the kingdom to the prince. Victory cries rose all around, but then, on the other side, things began to go wrong in the prince's own family. 1 year passed, then 2, and then many more. The prince had gone out on a journey, but never returned. The queen mother cried day and night, beating her chest, eventually took to bed in grief. The king constantly worried, thinking, waiting, weeping. Eventually went blind from sorrow. The kingdom fell into darkness. The palace echoed with cries of despair. Then suddenly, one day, just at dawn, the royal gates shook with the sound of drums and conches, the trumpeting of elephants, the neighing of horses, and the commanding voices of soldiers and guards filled the air. The queen asked in trembling voice, "What's happening? Who is it?" The king asked, "Who comes with such thunder and joy?" The people of the kingdom rushed to the palace in excitement. The prince and princess had returned, married and glowing with joy. The king, trembling with emotion, came forward and took the prince into his arms. The queen stumbled in tears and warmly welcomed the princess as her own daughter. The people cheered with cries of joy. Their long-lost prince had finally come back. Then the prince gently touched the king's eyes with a golden stick, and just like magic, the king could see again. Seeing her son and daughter-in-law, the queen's illness vanished, and then the prince, the princess from the once sleeping kingdom, the king and the queen, all ruled the kingdom together in peace and joy.